The morning had started beautifully too beautifully. In hindsight, the kind of day that tricks you into believing life is gentle and predictable. The sky was an endless blue, the sun warm but not harsh, and the canyon air carried that sharp, exhilarating scent of pine and stone. Our son, Evan, had suggested the trip the night before with an unusually enthusiastic smile. "Let's go somewhere we used to go when I was a kid," he'd said. "Just the three of us." I'd felt a sentimental tug at that. Mark had too, I could tell by the way his eyes softened. We thought maybe the rough years were finally fading, that our grown son was trying to mend old cracks. When we reached the lookout, I stood near the railing, breathing in the vastness below. The drop was dramatic, jagged rocks, a dry riverbed, the kind of depth that made your stomach flutter. Mark unpacked the small picnic we brought, setting it on a flat stone. Evan paced behind us, hands in his pockets, silent in a strange, coiled way. I chalked it up to nerves or the awkwardness of reconnecting. "Come stand closer," Evan said suddenly. "I'll take your picture." "Turn around, yeah. Right there." I stepped toward the edge, smiling over my shoulder. Mark joined me, his hand brushing mine. I remember thinking how nice it felt, simple, safe. But then Evan's posture shifted. His shoulders squared. His footsteps came fast, crunching the gravel with a force that didn't match a casual stroll. Before I could turn fully to look at him, someone slammed into our backs. It wasn't a shove of clumsy imbalance, it was violent, intentional. The world jerked, tilted, then vanished beneath us. Wind whipped past my ears, stealing the scream rising in my throat. Rocks scraped my arms as we tumbled onto a narrow ledge halfway down the cliff. My body hit hard, white-hot pain racing through me. Above, Evan stood at the rim of the canyon, motionless, watching us like a stranger, like a hunter confirming his mark. In that instant, the realization cut deeper than the fall. Our own son had just tried to kill us. For several long seconds, I couldn't breathe. The shock of the fall had rattled every bone in my body, leaving my thoughts fogged and scattered. Dust swirled around us, settling into my hair, my eyelashes, the cuts stinging across my arms. I tried to push myself upright, but a sharp pain shot through my ribs and forced me back down with a gasp. That's when Mark's hand clamped around my wrist, tight, urgent, trembling. His face hovered inches from mine, pale and speckled with blood and dirt. His eyes, though, were wide awake, terrified, yes, but alert in a way that chilled me. "Don't move," he hissed. "Play dead now." His voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the ringing in my ears with perfect clarity. Confused, I opened my mouth to ask why, but Mark's expression hardened. He flicked his eyes upward, then back at me. That was when I realized he wasn't just scared, he was calculating, instinctively protective in a way only a man fighting to keep his family alive could be. I froze. Slowly, painfully, I let my body go limp, letting my arms fall awkwardly beside me, turning my face toward the rocks. My breath came too fast at first, but Mark's fingers pressed into my wrist again, guiding me, urging me to slow it down, to become still, to become nothing. Above us, a shadow moved. Evan. His silhouette stretched across the cliff's edge, angled, searching. My skin prickled as I imagined him peering down, trying to make out whether we still breathed, whether he needed to climb down and finish what he started. The sound of pebbles dislodging echoed down toward us. Evan had stepped closer. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scramble to safety, to hide, but I couldn't. Any movement now would be a death sentence. Mark's voice was barely audible. "He's checking. Don't react." I forced my eyelids to flutter half shut. Through the narrow slit between my lashes, I saw Evan's figure lean forward slightly, as if assessing the damage, as if admiring the results. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was our son. The boy whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose nightmares I soothed, whose birthday cakes I baked. Now he was watching, evaluating, making sure we were no longer a problem in his life. Eventually, his shadow shifted, then faded. Footsteps slow, careful, moved along the ridge above, a final inspection before he left. Beside me, Mark stayed perfectly still, every muscle locked. Minutes stretched like hours before we dared inhale fully again. Only then did the terrifying truth settle into my bones. Evan wasn't panicking. He wasn't confused or remorseful. He was making sure the job was done. And we were alive only because we had learned to die faster than he could confirm it. When Evan's footsteps finally faded into the distance, Mark exhaled shakily and pushed himself up onto his elbows. The movement cost him his face twisted with pain, his breath hitching, but he managed it. I crawled closer, every inch of my body protesting, and brushed the dirt from his cheek with trembling fingers. "He thinks we're dead," Mark murmured. "That gives us a chance." But not much of one. The canyon around us felt enormous, swallowing sound, light, and security. The ledge we had landed on was barely 2 meters wide, with nothing but jagged drop below and sheer wall above. Climbing back up was impossible. Going down was our only hope. As I tried to steady myself, memories flickered through my mind like broken film. Evan's angry phone calls last month, the mysterious man who had come to our house looking for him, the overdue bills hidden in his drawer, his strange smile whenever we asked if he needed help. But the final, dreadful piece slid into place. The life insurance. The policy Mark had renewed just weeks ago. And how Evan had casually asked, "So, how much is the payout now?" My stomach turned to ice. "Mark," I whispered, "this wasn't sudden. He planned this." Mark closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "I know." He scanned the cliff wall beside us, searching for a path, any escape. A faint trail curved downward along the rock face, narrow but walkable if we moved carefully and quietly. "We follow that," he said. "He won't expect us to move fast. Pain is our advantage." It sounded insane. Every step would hurt. Every breath already did. But staying was worse. Staying meant waiting for Evan to return with more certainty and less hesitation. Mark gripped my hand, his voice low but steady. "We survived this, together." I nodded, swallowing my fear, and together we began inching along the ledge, each step carrying the weight of betrayal and the burning need to understand how our son had become our enemy. We had barely made it halfway down the narrow trail when the canyon swallowed a new sound. Evan's voice, sharp and furious, bouncing off the stone walls like a warning siren. I froze mid-step, gripping the rock with raw, bleeding fingers. "They're gone! How the hell are they gone?" he shouted. Another voice answered, deeper, impatient. "You said they'd fall clean. Maybe they got caught on something." My heart thudded painfully. He wasn't alone. He had brought someone who didn't sound shocked or horrified, but annoyed, as if this were business, and we were the failed part of the job. Mark tugged my wrist gently, pulling me behind a large, jagged boulder before either man could look down our way. We crouched, barely breathing, as the gravel above us crunched under boots. "Check the lower path," Evan ordered, his tone cold. "Clip nothing like the boy I raised. If they're alive, they won't get far." A cascade of loosened pebbles tumbled down near us. I bit my lip to keep from gasping. Mark leaned close enough that I could feel his breath warm my ear. "Don't look up," he whispered. "He'll see movement." I nodded, staring at the dirt beneath my knees, fighting the tremor in my legs. Every second stretched unbearably long. Evan's shadow slid across the canyon wall like a hunting predator. When it passed over us, I felt my whole body tighten with instinctual terror. Finally, the footsteps drifted a few meters away, but not far. Mark squeezed my hand, one silent signal. We moved, slow, bent low, barely disturbing the dust beneath our feet. The canyon narrowed, pressing in on us like a throat, making every sound feel amplified, dangerous. I risked a glance upward. For a split second, Evan stood on the ridge above, his face twisted with cold focus, scanning the rocks with a predator's precision. That expression, more than the fall, more than the pain, shattered something in me. The boy I loved wasn't just angry or lost. He was hunting us, and he wasn't going to stop. By the time the ranger outpost came into view, a small cabin tucked between boulders and scrub, the adrenaline that had sustained us began to evaporate all at once. My legs shook uncontrollably, turning every step into a battle. Mark leaned heavily on me, each breath rattling, but he kept pushing forward, refusing to let us collapse before we reached help. I slammed my hand against the emergency buzzer mounted by the door. The sharp, metallic clang echoed across the canyon. Within seconds, 2 rangers burst out, eyes widening at the sight of us, bloodied, limping, dust-covered, looking like ghosts crawling out of the earth. "What happened?" one demanded. "Our son," Mark croaked. "He tried to kill us." The disbelief lasted only a moment. Our state told the story better than words. They ushered us inside, wrapped us in blankets, checked our injuries, and radioed for backup. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the cup of water they gave me. Through the open window, helicopter blades soon thundered in the distance, growing louder as law enforcement swarmed the canyon like a wave of awakening justice. And then came the news over the ranger's radio. "Suspect located. He's yelling that the bodies should be there, searching the gorge again." I closed my eyes. Mark reached across the table, taking my hand. Evan hadn't run. He hadn't fled the scene. He had waited, furious, confused, demanding that officers check again, certain that our deaths were a guarantee, not an attempt. When they lifted us into the helicopter, the canyon shrinking below, Mark wrapped his arm around my shoulders. His voice was rough, but steady. "We made it," he whispered. "We weren't supposed to, but we did." I leaned into him, staring out at the winding path we had crawled over, bled on, survived. "No," I murmured. "We didn't just make it. We put an end to the person he tried to become." Below, the canyon swallowed the last echo of Evan's rage as the helicopter carried us towards safety, alive, together, and stronger than he ever imagined.